Hello. So, that engine mount bracket is gone. My buddy Dustin came over. He had a massive ass pry bar. Broke that bolt loose. The one that went between there. This guy came out. And then we just undid that little 19 or 17. No, it's a 17. Now, to put it back together. So I got the half shaft on. Now I'm going to install this bracket. Something else we did was we cleaned the threads in here for the bracket. I'm going to pop this in. These two in the bottom go there. This top guy goes there. And the mounts are bolted up. These are 17, 3. They're in. The guys back here, they're in. Something I'm going to do for safety, I'm going to paint these black because these get rusty and can mess up the threads. So for safety, I'm going to paint that. Subframe's ready to go under here. Hello. So, new day. Engine is on the subframe. That came out super good. I painted the bolts black so it doesn't get rusty. Today I'm going to install the power steering pump. So, it should just be able to pop in. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to loosen the pulley, take the belt off, and then get started with this idler pulley. So, you want it on the on position, or you want to be twisting it to the right. And then the belt loses tension, and you can be able to undo it. Belt is free. And now to remove this pulley, 13 or 12, it's actually a 12. Put a 12 there. Wow. Also, another thing to do for safety, you can check if your engine's locked up. Mine's luckily is not. Mine's moved. Pretty important to check that because you don't want a seized engine. But sweet, that's awesome. Nothing seems to be out of the ordinary. Everything's in proper shape. But let's pop that bad boy in. These are mounting spots right there. You can only go one way. There's no way of putting this on wrong. Now what I'm noticing is that AC line might be in the way. But I'm gonna put this on. I can't do it with one hand. On each bolt, I put my best friend anti-seize because it's always good to have that. Unfortunately, the Z3 belt will not fit no matter how much you get it. And if you do get it, it'll probably be too tight. But I tried, not enough to get it on there. So, you won't be able to run this belt, unfortunately. This belt's not too bad. It's not cracked or anything. Got the power steering pump on for at least. And for that AC line, I just bent it out of the way. I just moved it a little forward. Now the issue is my power steering line. I'm not gonna mess with it too much until I already have it in the car and I'm trying to figure out my power steering line stuff. These are the shifter cables off of the Accord. And I've been doing a lot of messing around, looking at stuff, and I found out a few things. This is the shifter cable bracket from the Z3. As you can see, it bolts up perfectly, it lines up good. And then the shifter cable, they use some bolt style brackets to be held in. Now the Z3 cables, which are these, they would go into the slot. You'll put this clip on it right there to lock it into place. While these don't really have that. They do have a little slot, but if you try to put this in, it's too big. There's the Accord transmission. If you look, there's two holes for that bracket to bolt into, which are these. These would bolt in. So in order for these to basically work, I need to make these brackets bolt onto shifter cable bracket. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna shove a self tapper in there, or maybe a nut and bolt setup, put one in the bottom, and figure something out to clamp it up there. But once you do that, you clamp these together, Accord shifter cable assembly will work perfectly. And they do line up as they should. This does move back and forth and freely. It's in neutral right now, and it'll work good. I gotta bolt up the Z3 bracket or shifter cable bracket, and then bolt these up. That's pretty cool. I gotta make something work, but I'm happy that I was able to find a solution to make my Z3 transmission work. So you can still use your original gear selector if you use Accord style cables and Accord shifter box. you need to use this box because it has a pivot in the bottom. That pivot down there is what makes it go into gear, basically. So if you look, there's nothing here. It's at the bottom, and it'll go onto this. This is an RSX shifter box. It is from an RSX Type S, but it's the same as a Civic or a base model. So you can run this shifter box with a 6-speed or 5-speed. Anyways, this is where the cable would attach to. It's on the top. So it's basically pulling. It pulls and... So this is where the cable attaches to. It's on the top. This one has nothing. It only has it in the bottom, as you can see. So this guy, nothing in the bottom. It just has one attachment here, another one for, I believe, the reverse. If you introduce cord shifter cable, it'll be perfect because you can run your Z3 Trans the way it is with everything on it. So you can still use your gear selector. But if you have RSX shifter cables, RSX shifter box, then you have to change the gear selector. But you can use an EP3 SI gear selector or a RSX base model gear selector. You can use those, but you can only use the top half, the selecting mechanism itself. So what you would have to do is you take off these 4 bolts, they're 10 millimeters. You take off this entire assembly. Now the bottom piece you keep, because that's what you'll need to be able to run this transmission. But the top part where the cables would go, that's what you would swap with the EP3 or RSX base model. Now, if you can get your hands on a RSX Type S, which is the 6-speed one, that would be perfect because you'll have reverse lockout. Since the 5 speeds don't have the reverse lockout, you won't have a reverse lockout, if you don't mind that. If it's a big deal, then you can buy the PRB, which is 6-speed one. It should cost a lot of money, anywhere from $400 to $500. Or you can get the EP3, which you can find from $50 to $200, depending. But I'm being cheap. I got some shifter cables and a shifter box from an Accord. They fit perfectly on this, so that's what I'll be using. So another thing, basically have to use the Z3 cable bracket, this guy, because if you use this bracket, it won't fit. So this for the 5-speed, this is a K20Z3 transmission from an Accord. This will not bolt up, however I find. Now you can make a custom bracket to make it fit somewhere, and it will be perfect. But I don't feel like making a bracket and stuff if I can use this one. All I have to do is just make a few holes for this little bracket to hold the cable. This one already has it, which would have been perfect, but there's really nowhere to put it. I don't really feel like messing with it because it's pretty big and bulky. So this looks clean. I bet I can make something work out. So here's what I'll be doing. So I have it lined up basically. So I'll be shoving a shelf tapper down there. Then up here, I might be drilling it through. Maybe shoving a shelf tapper. I'm to clamp this and one at the bottom. Honestly, you could probably get away with only using one, but for safety measures, I'm gonna try to make 2 of them work. Same thing over here. So I'm gonna have them like sitting in this angle because I think it looks clean. Here's how it should look when I'm done. Here's the finished product. Just 2 shelf tappers down there, 2 shelf tap up here. All it really does is just holds it in place and the cables work properly. This is in. So these shifter cables, so the Z3 came with, some cut up cables, and this is a cool brass bushing. But I cannot get it off for the life of me. I smashed the piss out of it. So I think a few options are heat it up, break it loose, or maybe cut this to relieve all the tension. But I'm just not going to bother. This thing's annoying. So I decided to move on to this. This guy had the bushing. When I took it off, the ring was still stuck. Got my can lock, twisted back and forth. And sure enough, after a little bit of battle, came out. It's just really rusty. So, in order for this to not happen again, we have our best friend, anti-seize. We're gonna anti-seize this little rod. This gotta be nice and happy. Rod has anti-seize. I'm gonna slowly put this guy in. It's got a little bit of play. So I'm pretty sure bushing is supposed to go down here, like a little rubber piece. We do have one in here. So I have a rod. I'm gonna push it out and try to shove it in there. Let's get to work. The rod method worked. Put it in like this. Smashed it. Went all the way through. Voila. So, take this out. I'm gonna shove this guy in there. That's a little tight. I can imagine this getting stuck in the future. So the bushing wouldn't work, so I did the next best thing. Electrical tape. Wrapped it around a couple times. And I should want to go in snug. I might have put too many. I'll be right back. I'm just gonna make it work, but I put a little bit of electrical tape. I want to go in snug. It went in snug, but it's a little too loose. I put one more. Now it's too big, so I'm gonna mess with it. I got it in. What I found to be helpful is I put the electrical tape on top, and then I shoved the brass bushing in. But now it's nice and snug, nice and happy. It's all anti-seized up, so it's gonna get seized in the future. Now I can put a little bushing over that. Wow, that's perfect. Oh, by the way, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, then up, reverse. That's how that works. Pretty cool. And now you can also make your reverse lockout. You can make it work. You gotta figure out which one of these is positive and negative. Run a ground somewhere random, then run a power. I'm not sure how much, if it's gotta be 12 volts. But I'm pretty sure you gotta find a constant power. And when you're driving, you can hit a switch and you'll have basically a reverse lockout if you wanna do this method. I honestly don't plan to use the corded cables and shifter for a while. I prefer to use the RSX one or the Civic one. It's basically a lot shorter and it feels very good. But if you're in a budget and you're just trying to make it work, the corded shifter cables and the shifter box is perfect. And this is how it should look. Bushing is in all together. Right now I'm just testing it, so it's pretty damn loose. So there's a problem. This is supposed to be in the center, but it's all the way back. And I'm only able to go first, third, and barely sixth. I looked at this one again, and I noticed it's the plate and then this bushing piece. I believe it's happening is this should be up here too. So right now it's really hard to shift, really struggling to move it. So what I'm gonna do is put this up there. So instead of being behind this plate, it'll be in front. Update, here it is. It's all complete. So I just drilled out the bracket a little bigger, and I drilled this metal bracket too. And then this rubber piece, instead of being out here, it's inside. And I just used these bolts that I got from Harbor Freight. Used the smallest one. Use a drill bit that's literally almost the same size as these little nuts and bolts. And they are on, they're pretty good. This came out too perfect because now the shifter is actually in the center now. Right now it's in neutral, as you can see. Oh, it popped out. But it goes to neutral. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and reverse is a little tricky. There's nothing holding it, but it does go to reverse. So it works perfect. This is so good. It's a little hard right now because there's nothing holding onto it, but it feels kind of short. This is not bad at all. I might consider leaving this, but we'll see. But this is awesome. It's such a good solution. This is a 5-speed shifter box. And and there's some proof I have. I took this from that Accord too. 5-speed right there. Only goes to 5. It'll still work because there's a ball. So it kind of can go anywhere it wants and stuff. If you have a Z3 transmission, you can use the Accord shifter box and Accord shifter cables. Also, these are the same as a TSX. Now, if you have a EP3SI, RSX based, and an RSX Type S, you can use the RSX shifter cables with the RSX shifter box. Since I don't have a RSX or EP3 transmission, the Z3 Trans uses an Accord style gear selector. You need to get creative with it. You couldn't use this cable bracket because it's a little too different. So I made the one from the Z3 work by drilling the holes out bigger and bolting it on. And this is pretty damn good. I'm pretty hyped with how this worked out. It's super good. Pretty notchy. And you can even feel it by hand. Neutral, first, second, third, fourth. That's just so damn cool to me. That's a big step to get over with. Now that the shifter stuff is complete, the next thing I gotta mess with is the exhaust. I don't want to run this one. There's an EP3 or RSX. It's basically just a stock K20 header. So right here, we have the header that came off the K20Z3 engine. It's basically some aftermarket headers. I'm gonna assume they're probably eBay, to be honest. They're super light. There's no brand on them. So I don't think they're anything special, but it's better than the stock headers from a K20. What I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna touch fit it, cut it up, and try to make it work. By the way, if you have questions on this, I'm gonna say this. Could you run the Accord style cables and still run your RSX box or Civic box? No, you can't run it because there's no ball in the bottom. These cables need to hook up down there, and there's a ball down here. These are meant to have the cable installed on here on the top. If you look, if I'm pulling forward, the cable goes forward. This one, if I pull forward, it makes that ball go back. So when I pull forward, the cable goes back. This one, if I pull forward, the cable also goes forward with it. Could you use your RSX cables on the Z3 transmission? Could you run the Z3 gear selector and the Accord shifter box, but use RSX cables? No, these cables are a little different. This part will line up, but these won't. These have like two circles. There's a circle there, circle here. The circle on the side will hook up, but the one on the bottom will not. Now, if you get crafty, there's a ball. You can get crafty and make something like weld maybe like a rod to the bottom. Yes. I recommend just get the Accord cable. It's much easier and better. Now, if you want to run your RSX shifter box and the RSX shifter cables, then you need to run an EP3 RSX or RSX Type S gear selector. If you can get the RSX Type S gear selector, that would be the best if you have a 6-speed. But if you plan to run a 5-speed, you'll be perfectly fine with using the RSX shifter cable, shifter box, and you don't have to change the gear selector. You only have to change the gear selector if you have a Z3 transmission. And if you don't want to change the gear selector, then you need to change the shifter cables and the shifter box with an Accord or a TSX style. Hope that made sense and it could help somebody out. I know this would have helped me a few months ago. I didn't know about that. When I was looking at these shifter cables, I looked at the transmission. I never knew that the gear selector would be different for some reason. But I'm glad I know now. I was able to get a good ass deal on the box and shifter cables and this transmission. And don't worry about this transmission, by the way. This is not for me. I kind of got it to flip it. The shifter cable stuff and the transmission stuff is all good. I don't have to worry about it. And I'm so glad it's on the subframe. Next thing to do, I'm gonna loosen these bolts, get this header off. Also, the headers are like a little bit to this side. So I'd have to cut here, try to angle it. And also, it just comes out too much, so it might hit the firewall. So these headers aren't looking too good, unfortunately.